Parents, what secret do you know about your child that you will never tell to him? Story 1. I am a parental figure to my orphaned younger siblings, and there's something I'll never tell my sister. When she was going through a terrible period as a drug addict, late teens, she stole our mom's wallet, and all of our mom's credit cards and bank accounts had to be canceled and changed. Our mom was in poor health but had a large life insurance policy she had gotten almost 15 years prior, back when she was healthier. When the accounts were canceled, she forgot to update the auto payments for the insurance. It was declined and subsequently canceled. She couldn't get another policy anymore. She had too many health problems. My mom told me about all this in confidence. Less than 2 years later, our mom passed away. Everyone thought she had a life insurance policy to help us, but she didn't. She left absolutely nothing. I'm the only one who knows why. It would break my sister to know her addiction cost us several $100,000. Recovering from our mom's death was really hard. Siblings moved in with me, etc. And the insurance money could have spared us a long period of financial and emotional struggle. Story 2. When my daughter was 3, she accidentally hit my mom on the head with a toy, as 3-year-olds sometimes do. My mom had a blood clotting condition and developed a clot in her head about a week later, eventually passing away from it. I'm not sure anyone but me has made that connection, and I aim to keep it that way. My daughter had no idea what she was doing. She was just 3. She would probably be devastated if she ever found out, especially since she struggles with her mental health and can get to a really dark place with too much bad news. My mom never seemed to realize what happened. She had lived with the disease for 13 years, and most people only make it to 6, so she always felt very fortunate. My wife would be heartbroken to know this. Even though she doesn't think there's a link, she probably doesn't even remember that moment anymore. So I'll never tell them, and that's okay. Story 3. I caught my son once pretending to milk himself into a bucket while taking a bath. He was only around 4 years old, so I don't think he remembers, but he was standing over a bucket and squeezing his body. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me he was pretending his body was an udder and he was trying to get milk. I said, "Okay, honey," and slowly closed the door. The end. Edit. Yes, my son was 4, and I let him play in the tub by himself for a little while after helping him bathe. I understand that others may have done things differently, and I respect that, but it wouldn't hurt to be a little less judgmental toward parents like myself who know what their own children are capable of handling and allow them the level of independence and responsibility they deem appropriate. Story 4. I went for a walk once with my daughter when she was about a year old. It was along a cement-paved path through a small scenic park area, lots of suburban nature and calm surroundings. I had brought the stroller, but she was getting a bit fussy, so I took her out and sat her on the handle facing me. I held on to her waist and basically used her position and my forearms to push the stroller. As we walked, a section of the pavement ahead was suddenly covered in crickets. I don't know why there were so many. I had never seen that before in the middle of the day on that trail. I nervously began pushing through them with the stroller, hoping that if I moved slowly, they'd hop out of the way. Most of them did, but one jumped right onto my daughter's face. I panicked, and in a split-second reaction, I accidentally smacked her. The cricket had already hopped off before I even made contact, but she looked so surprised and started crying. Then I cried too because I felt awful, but at the same time, I couldn't stop laughing at how ridiculous the whole thing was. I got a lot of strange looks as I laughed and cried all the way home. She will never know. Story 5. My son's grandparents have custody of him in Australia. His mother and I had a one-time fling on a beach in North Carolina, along with another person. Later, she ended up in prison for trafficking large quantities of drugs in Australia, which is a serious offense there. I believe she's serving 25 years to life. One day I got a call from the Australian version of Child Services telling me I needed to come pick up my son. I didn't even know I had a son until that moment. He was 7 years old. Apparently, she had listed me on his birth certificate and kept my contact info on a bookmark that hung from her rearview mirror. His grandparents came and took him in. They tell him his dad is off fighting in the war, and I've only spoken to him twice. I've sent in my part of a paternity test multiple times to confirm if he's actually mine, but his grandparents ignore it. I think they're worried I'll just show up and take him away. He doesn't really know me, and it would be incredibly awkward to take custody of a 12-year-old I've never met, especially when I'm not even sure he's mine. I think he'll be angry when he finds out the truth. So I wrote a leather-bound journal with everything I think he should know. Stories about my life, time in the army, travels, and lots of advice for situations he might face. I even included a glossary and an index. I wrapped it up with my own dog-eared copy of the Ranger Handbook, filled with personal notes, an old set of my dog tags, and a way to contact me. I sent the package to a lawyer's office in Australia with instructions to deliver it to him on his 18th birthday. I'm looking forward to the online post he'll make when that day comes. Story 6. Years ago, we had an amazing cat named Chosen One. We all loved this cat, but especially my oldest son, who was just beginning to drive at the time. He was around 17. One day, my son was leaving the house, and as he left, he reached down to give Chosen a little affection, then headed out the door. Unbeknownst to him, the cat followed him outside, and for some reason, we believe Chosen must have run under the car, though no one actually witnessed the event, so we're only speculating on what happened. My son drove off, and a little while later, I went outside and found Chosen lying on the driveway, curled up in a ball. He had passed away. We think he either ran under the car or was sitting in front of the tire, and when my son drove away, he accidentally ran him over. We were all pretty upset, of course. When my son came home, we told him that Chosen had been hit by a car in the road and didn't make it. We've never told him, and never will, that we believe he was the one who accidentally caused it. He would blame himself and carry that guilt forever for losing his favorite cat. Story 7. When my first wife was 4 months pregnant, she was diagnosed with stage 3/4 breast cancer. At 18 weeks, the doctor gave her a few options. Her best chance at survival was to terminate the pregnancy and begin aggressive chemotherapy. We talked about it, and she chose to try to carry our son to term. They delivered our son healthy about 6 weeks early. She passed away about 5 months after he was born. I've since remarried, and now he's almost 18. I don't plan on telling him that she chose to save him at the cost of her own life. It was a difficult time, and I've never blamed him, and never will. Edit. I wanted to clarify a few things. After her mastectomy and a thorough biopsy, we found out she had an extremely aggressive form of breast cancer. In fact, by the time we learned how far it had spread, the treatment would have been in vain. Even if we had ended the pregnancy, her life expectancy likely wouldn't have exceeded 2 years. We had already made the decision to keep the baby before knowing this. The more invasive treatments, MRIs, and multiple x-rays, would have put some risk on our son, so we made a choice. He knows his mother died of cancer, and he knows it happened soon after he was born, but not the details. He never knew her and doesn't grieve her in the way one might expect. It sounds harsh, but it's the truth. She did write him several letters, the first to be given on his 18th birthday, the next at 21, and the last one on his wedding day. They're sealed and private. I've never opened them, and I don't plan to. It's possible she shared the full story in those letters, but I think it's unlikely. Before she passed, she made me promise to protect him from the pain of knowing the truth about her illness and decision. Story 8. I know he injured at least 2 people and was injured himself at least once during political rallies that turned into fights. Some nights he would come home bleeding and with a black eye. He was a boxer, so I didn't think much of it at the time, and I'm sure some of those were boxing injuries. But I know for a fact that a few were from those political riots. Nearly a decade later, after he moved out and out of the country coincidentally, my husband and I finally decided it was time to pack up his old room and turn it into something else. That's when we found a few things linking him to local extremist political groups. Just a few scraps he must have forgotten to take. One of them was an old newspaper clipping where I could clearly see him delivering a hard punch to the face of a political opponent. He was in disguise, but I recognized the clothes he wore. Another photo from the same article showed the person he punched lying on the ground while our son prepared to hit someone else. After collecting everything incriminating, my husband and I decided to burn what he had left behind. There was nothing to gain by keeping it. The articles were quite old, and our son had moved to a different country that doesn't have the same kind of political climate. He had followed a very specific local form of extremism. Edit. Since many people are asking, we're from a southern European country. It's been difficult here for a while, and I worry more young people will turn to extremism. They often hear their parents or grandparents talk about how easy life seemed during the years when the country was under dictatorship. They hear stories about how there were fewer worries back then. Now these young people face unemployment, debt, a declining population, and tension over immigration. We never had to worry about those things. Then they go to school and hear about how powerful the country used to be. Then they step outside and see how far things have fallen. We used to be respected, and now many see Southern Europe as a burden. I think that desire to restore what once was leads some to extremist ideologies. I do miss the simplicity of those years, but I believe that kind of politics belongs in the past. Story 9. This is sort of a meta thing, but my mom didn't tell me, until right before she passed away, that she always knew I was never going to hold a regular job or live what most would call an ordinary life. Her background in psychiatry had long ago led her to believe I was schizotypal and prone to a pattern of atypical depression. But she never told me until the very end, because she knew how important it was for me to figure things out for myself, rather than live under the weight of a diagnosis. She told me she had never been disappointed in me, and that even if I faced challenges, there would still be a future for me. She said she was proud that I had taken on my struggles openly and that I had never given up. Years later, I haven't improved much, but her encouragement and belief in me still linger. Whenever I'm in a truly dark place, she's still there in my head, offering comfort. Love you, Mom. Story 10. I'm not a mother, but my grandma definitely kept a secret that came back to surprise her. My cousin was adopted as a baby by my grandma because his birth parents were both mentally disabled and unable to care for him. He still had a relationship with his biological father up until his father passed away when my cousin was 15. Well, this past Christmas, my cousin, who's now 23, ran into a stranger at a gas station who looked exactly like his late dad. It didn't take long for them to realize they were half-brothers. And that's when it all came out. My grandma had known about this half-brother the entire time. Yet she had completely excluded him from the family for his whole life, simply because he had been adopted by a non-blood family. Needless to say, my cousin and my grandma haven't spoken since New Year's. Meanwhile, I'm just starting to get to know a cousin I never even knew I had. Story 11. This one isn't about me, it's about my own mother. She kept from me that I have a half-sister. I found out she had a child before she married my dad. The baby was placed for adoption, and my mom spent time in one of the Magdalene laundries. Even 30 years later, she still couldn't drive past that building without visibly shaking. Both she and her sister took the secret to their graves. I only found out when her daughter, my half-sister, contacted me. The most heartbreaking part? Just before my aunt passed away, I remember watching a documentary about the Magdalene laundries and expressing outrage at how horrific they were. I had no idea my own mother had lived through that. My aunt agreed with me during the conversation, with the kind of detached empathy you'd give a subject you hadn't personally experienced. Her face betrayed nothing. She even spoke to my half-sister on the phone and never said a word to me. I wish my mom had told me. I would have given her nothing but love and understanding. From the letters she left, it's clear she didn't tell us because she thought her messy divorce from my dad in the 1970s, a time when divorce carried heavy stigma, was already enough for my sister and me to deal with. But my sister and I both agree. We would have supported her no matter what. It breaks my heart that she went through all of that alone. Story 12. When my son was about 10 months old, there was a cricket on the floor by our patio door. This giant cricket looked like the king of all the neighborhood crickets. It had clearly survived a valiant battle against some invading cricket pirates because it was missing a couple of legs. So here I am, holding the baby thinking, okay, brave cricket, you've got to go. I'm really not in the mood to hear your victory songs in the middle of the night. I put my son down and unlocked the patio door, only to look around in confusion, because the cricket king had vanished. Turns out my son had no sympathy for the heroic insect, his great fight, or his loyal subjects, because the only thing I saw was one thin cricket leg slowly snaking its way out of my son's tightly clamped mouth. And the best part, as I tried to dig that bug out of his mouth, he fought hard, refused to open up, and then ate every last bite. Story 13. Dad here. I don't like my daughter. She's mean, vindictive, and lacks empathy. She ran away from home multiple times when she was 12 and 13. She had a baby at 14. I love the baby. He's a great kid. She's not a terrible mom, but she's still a teenager. She always wants to go out with friends, and honestly, sometimes I wish she'd just go and stay gone. Like maybe even end up in a juvenile facility where she'd have a chance to finish school or get her GED. She never went to high school, refused to attend even one day, and made my life miserable when I tried to make her. But the baby? He would have me as his main influence, and I've learned from my past mistakes. I was young when I raised her, but now I feel ready to be a strong father figure. He needs me, and no one else can help him like I can. Would I ever wish harm on my daughter? Absolutely not. Would I help her if she got into trouble? Without a doubt. Would I ever undermine her with her child? Never. Even when I disagree with her parenting choices. For example, she gives him a bottle when he's falling asleep, which I read isn't great. I mentioned it once, she ignored it, so I let it go. When she's angry at me, I try to reach out. I'll send her a message trying to explain things, and she'll reply with something like, "As soon as I get enough money, you and mom are never going to see me or my son again, LOL. Don't bother calling. Delete my number. We ain't coming back, bye." That's the kind of person she is. And I know why. Because I was a bad father to her. I tried my best, but I was weak. I see that now. I saw it even back then. I love her deeply. I've worked hard to support her, her mother, and now her baby. But I don't like her. People say things will get better when she hits her 20s. I hope so. Honestly, I wish she'd just go away until then. It's hard seeing a daily reminder of my own failure as a parent. But I stay supportive. When she was driving without a license or insurance, I insisted we take care of it. She failed the test twice with her mom. She only took it seriously when I went with her. That's what I do. I push her to improve. Her mom just hopes she will. I make her. But it's exhausting. I don't know how much longer I can be the only one trying. Like I said, I love her. I just don't like her. She feels like she's from another world, and one day, I look forward to only seeing her at holidays and special events. Story 14. I'm an uncle, more of a father than his biological dad ever was, and I'll never tell my nephew the full truth about his father. That truth? His dad is a professional athlete. Still is. But he didn't want to be around, and I don't want my nephew growing up thinking he was abandoned by someone so high profile. I want him to aim as high as possible. He clearly has great athletic genes, and if he wants to pursue sports, I want him to feel encouraged to go for it, without being distracted by the fact that his father chose to walk away. We'll revisit the conversation when he turns 18. That's the plan. Me and my sister will decide together. But for now, he just knows that Uncle Hazardous is his guy. Any guy stuff he wants to talk about? I'm here. His father made his choice. We don't need his support. Between my sister, our mom, and myself, we've got this. We can give him every opportunity he needs to become anything he wants to be. Story 15. I will never tell my daughter that she was almost not brought into this world, very early in the pregnancy, at my request. My wife had just given birth to our son, and about 4 months later, I had a strange dream where she gave birth again. When I woke up, I asked her if she was pregnant. She laughed and said no, telling me I was imagining things. But I insisted she take a test, and it was positive. We were still new parents, just getting used to having a baby in the house. I was exhausted, barely sleeping from caring for our son every night. The thought of having another child so soon completely overwhelmed me. I started discussing with her the possibility of ending the pregnancy. At first, she was completely against the idea, but eventually, at my urging, she made an appointment at a clinic. The night before we were supposed to go, I was discussing the situation on a message board called LUE, a subset of GameFAQs that I used to visit. I wrote a post explaining everything, and I read every single response. It was an eye-opening experience to see a community, usually known for jokes and sarcasm, offer such thoughtful and heartfelt replies. Their perspectives made me stop and reflect. Was I making this decision out of fear, or had I really thought it through? The next morning, I asked my wife what time her appointment was. After she told me, I looked her in the eyes and said, "Cancel it. We can do this." Last month, our daughter turned 10, and I truly can't imagine how I would have gotten through some of the hardest times in my life without her. She is such a beautiful, free spirit, and the fact that I almost deprived the world of her makes me emotional even now. Just thinking about it again after all these years brings tears to my eyes. I'm sorry that I almost made the wrong choice, Ree. You'll never know this, but you are one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I will always carry the weight of almost letting fear take you away before you even had a chance to live. Story 16. This isn't exactly a never tell him story, but it'll be at least a decade before we share this information with our son. When I was pregnant, He started out in the womb as a triplet. Unfortunately, the other two babies were very sick, and I had to undergo a multifetal pregnancy reduction at 14 weeks. We made the decision to let go of his brother and sister in order to give him the best chance to survive and thrive. Our son knows he had an older brother who was stillborn. He's grown up with that knowledge and talks about him with the kind of love and curiosity only a child can give to someone they've never met. We're not afraid for him to know the truth one day, but at age 5, we feel it's too early for him to fully grasp what happened. As someone who used to be a child and adolescent social worker, I know that kids this young can understand death, but the idea that they themselves could have died or been in danger can be deeply unsettling. It's not something we want him to carry yet. We also don't want him to experience feelings like survivor's guilt until he's mature enough to process and work through them in a healthy way. So yes, while this doesn't fully fit the original theme, it's a rare and deeply personal situation, one that we'll talk about in time when he's ready. Story 17. Son of a mother who never wanted me to know the full story here. I was around 13 to 16 years old when this happened. I'm 19 now. We had someone living with us for about 6 years. Not my mom's boyfriend, just a lodger, if you will. His life was difficult, to say the least. One day I had a friend over for a few days, and on the final day, we drove him to the train station. Just a 15-minute trip there and back. During that short window, my mother later told me that this man had been overheard on the phone talking to a friend, saying he was feeling hopeless and didn't want to go on. In that brief time we were away, he had taken a dog lead, used it as a makeshift noose around the stair banister, and taken his life. Tragically, he passed away. I was the first to see him, just 13 years old. I stood there shocked and frozen, not knowing what to do. My mom pulled me away, crying uncontrollably while I broke down in anger, lashing out at anything near me. She put me in the car while the police were called, and eventually I was sent to stay with my grandmother. School gave me some time off to recover, but when I returned, I felt like everyone was there for me, except me. I turned into a numb, angry version of myself, pretending I was fine by joking around and distracting myself. I acted out a lot, and though I was still popular, it was just a cover. Inside, I couldn't stop seeing that image. It followed me everywhere. I stopped going to school. I started hurting myself. When I turned 16, I began seeing therapists. Around that time, I started receiving anonymous emails filled with kind words and even donations. It confused me at first, but it gave me a strange sense of hope. Every week, without fail, about 125 pounds would come in. I didn't know who was behind it until months later. It was my mom. She had created a support page online, anonymously sharing my story, never using my name, but trying to raise funds to help me build a future. She knew my passion was computers and wanted me to have the tools I needed to pursue it. She was the one donating the most every week to help me buy equipment and build a proper setup. Realizing that, even behind the scenes, she had been fighting for me, it changed everything. It helped me begin to heal. It made me want to live. Now, I'm in university studying for a degree in computing. I hope to pursue my master's in a few years. I'm a much happier, more open person today. And it's all thanks to her. She still doesn't know I know it was her. Story 18. Son, here, my mom doesn't know that I know my grandfather. Her father is still alive. When he divorced my grandmother, it deeply upset my mom. She never forgave him for it. As I was growing up, she told me that he had passed away. But when I turned 18, I became curious and started doing some research, just using his name. I spent weeks calling people who matched his age and name until I finally found him living permanently in a hotel in New Mexico. It wasn't easy to contact him. He's older and not tech-savvy, but eventually we connected by phone. He started writing me letters, sometimes a few a week, sometimes none for a month. He shared stories about my mom as a child, about his time in the Korean War, and much more. When I turned 20, I flew to New Mexico to visit him. He had mentioned in his letters that he needed heart surgery, and although I don't remember the specifics, it felt important to go. We spent a weekend together, visiting local spots, and when he first saw me, he cried. It was emotional, and he was exactly the way I had imagined, wearing a pink rodeo-style shirt, bolo tie, and a big cowboy belt buckle. I have a picture of us in the hotel lobby. It's one of my favorites. He explained why he thought my mom stopped talking to him. My grandmother, being of Jewish faith, believed that once married, she could never remarry. My mom interpreted the divorce as something that doomed her mother to loneliness. But in reality, my grandmother did get remarried, and my grandfather remained single. I haven't spoken to him in about a year now. I still have the hotel number, but I'm afraid to call, afraid of what I might find out. He was such a kind person. I don't know if I'll ever forgive my mom for saying he had died. Sadly, that wasn't the only thing she hid from me. And now, history seems to be repeating itself. I haven't spoken to my mom in over 2 years, and she hasn't tried to reach out either. Story 19. They never told me that my dad was actually married when he met my mom. I found out by accident while going through some old belongings. My dad had kept an old ID for some reason. These IDs were from the communist era and looked more like little booklets that included major life events, like marriage. I was flipping through it and came across an entry for a marriage about a year before I was born. I thought, oh, this must be when they got married. Wait, that's not my mom's name. When I asked my mom about it, she wasn't eager to talk. She said something vague about that marriage not working out and quickly changed the subject. It's a strange feeling, knowing that I exist because of an affair. My dad was still married when he met my mom. Sometimes I find myself wondering about the woman he was married to. Just curiosity, really. My dad passed away when I was very young, so I'll never get to ask him. Story 20. I'm not a mom, I'm an aunt, but I've seen how these kinds of family secrets can build up over time. My sister has several children. Her two oldest kids have different fathers, and the younger ones all share the same dad. The oldest knows that my sister's husband isn't her biological father. But the second child? She was born right after the marriage, and I'm pretty sure my sister's husband is listed as her father on the birth certificate. No one has ever told her the truth, and that might be fine, except that her actual biological father is still alive. He just doesn't want anything to do with her. For now, I'm afraid that one day he'll change his mind. If that happens, my niece's world might come crashing down. Not just because the man she calls dad isn't her real father, but because every adult she loves and trusts knew the truth and never told her. It's not my place to say anything, but I'm always thinking about it. On top of that, I'm also a stepmom. My husband's daughter isn't biologically his either. He's white, his ex-wife is white, and their daughter is mixed race. His ex-wife was already pregnant when they started dating, so he knew from the beginning. His daughter is 9 now and smart enough to start noticing that she doesn't look like anyone else in the family. But her mom hasn't told her the truth, and neither has my husband. I suspect the little girl has already figured it out. Still, it breaks my heart that no one has been honest with her. I've decided that if either of these girls ever ask me, I'll tell them the truth. Story 21. My son's diploma was changed after graduation, and he has no idea. His high school has a strange system for calculating class rank. It's more than just GPA. It includes things like course difficulty and extra credit points. So going into senior year, my son had the second highest GPA, just 1 point behind another student who wasn't shy about reminding him of it. That student was certain he'd be valedictorian. But my son did his research. He figured out how the ranking worked and realized he could overtake the other student if he took a more difficult course load and earned high marks. He worked incredibly hard. Meanwhile, the other student chose easy electives his final semester, missing out on key points needed for honors. By the end of the year, my son had earned the top spot. He became the valedictorian. We were beyond proud of him. The other students' parents weren't pleased. They even bought a congratulatory ad in the senior night program that read, "You'll always be our valedictorian." Still, everyone at the school knew the truth, except apparently one very forgetful English teacher. She was in charge of organizing graduation and handling the diplomas. Somehow, despite the school paper, award night, and the official program, she missed the fact that my son was valedictorian. And on his diploma, she placed an emblem that said salutatorian. None of us noticed at the time. It was an emotional day. We were excited and proud. But later that night, after he left for the graduation party, I took another look and saw the mistake. I called the teacher immediately. At first, she was confused. Then she checked the program herself and realized her error. She apologized and told me she still had an emblem that read valedictorian. I went over that night, we switched it out, and now his diploma is correct. My son never saw the wrong version, but on the way home I realized something. If my son had the wrong emblem, that means the other student, the one who came in second, Likely received a diploma that says valedictorian. His parents probably feel vindicated. After everything my son did to earn that title, I'll never tell him. Hopefully, he'll never find out. Story 22. I will never tell my daughter what really happened during the time I was pregnant with her. Throughout college, I was in an abusive relationship. It escalated during my final year of university. One night, after quitting a job in frustration, I drank too much, and in that vulnerable moment, he took advantage, knowing I would never choose to end a pregnancy. He believed that by making me a mother, I'd feel too trapped and afraid to leave him. The day before I went into labor, I tried to leave. I packed a bag, but when he found out, he started yelling, pushing me around, smashing picture frames, glass everywhere, saying he would hurt himself and threatening to harm both of us. I called the police, but they sided with him. They said things like, I wouldn't want to be kept away from the birth of my first child either. That night, I had to sign him out of a psychiatric facility. I went into labor the next morning, early, likely triggered by the stress, and gave birth 11 hours later. Even then, his father tried to invade my space in the delivery room multiple times while I was vulnerable. I broke up with him a month later. When my daughter was about 8 months old, I started talking to someone online, a kind and supportive person who lived 5,000 miles away. Now, over 3 years later, she and I live those 5,000 miles away from that chapter of our lives. We haven't heard from him in about 2 years. The last message I ever received from him admitted to things that I'll never repeat to her. People often wonder why someone doesn't leave sooner. The truth is, I had a very difficult upbringing. I left one toxic environment for another without fully understanding how deep those patterns ran. By the time I realized the danger, we had a lease with my parents' names on it, and they refused to help me leave or break the contract. It got worse from there. After giving birth, I had two options: return to the apartment where I felt unsafe, in a town where the authorities had failed me, or move back in with my emotionally abusive parents. I chose the latter and fought hard to eventually get her out of that home too. Today, she's doing great. My fiance and I have worked very hard to give her the safe, joyful life she deserves. But I will never tell her how dark those times were. I will never tell her the details of how she came into this world. If she ever asks about her biological father, I'll tell her he was not a good man and that we left for our safety. I hope that will be enough for both her protection and her peace of mind. And thankfully, I have time before I need to face that conversation. Story 23. I'm the son in this story, and I know for a fact there's something my mom won't tell me. I have epilepsy, and during seizures, I tend to go into what I call vocal autopilot. I'll repeat things like, "Oh my God," or randomly ask what time it is, even though I'm completely unconscious of it. That's been the pattern for over 15 years and countless seizures. But recently it occurred to me, is that really all I say? So I finally asked my mom if I ever say anything inappropriate during a seizure. She told me no, that I've never used any bad language. But then, with a very specific tone, she added, "You do say some odd things though." And that's where the conversation ended. She didn't elaborate. She didn't want to talk about it any further. And to this day, no one else will tell me what those odd things are. For some context, during one seizure, I walked outside, climbed over a fence, and woke up in a public park, wearing nothing but a towel. I had just gotten out of the shower. Thankfully, it was empty at the time, but about 10 minutes earlier, it had been filled with school children. For reference, I was 22 at the time. So, yeah, if that wasn't enough to get anyone talking, whatever I've said during a seizure must be something pretty interesting. Come on, Mom, tell me. Story 24. This one's about my second-born. One day, my wife was taking her out of the minivan, just like every other day. She had her hands full and was juggling a bunch of things at once. She pulled the outside handle on the sliding door and gave it a good push to close it. Right as the door was sliding shut, she turned around, and in that exact moment, our daughter stuck her leg out. Her foot and ankle got caught in the sliding door as it slammed shut. My wife immediately panicked. She was crying, trying to stay calm, and had to reopen the door to get her foot out. It had latched partially. Amazingly, it wasn't broken, not even a sprain, just some redness and swelling. When I got home and heard what happened, I didn't fully believe how close of a call it had been, so I tried shutting the same door onto different objects, including an overripe cucumber, and learned that for the door to latch even on the first setting, the gap had to be less than half an inch. Honestly, it could have caused a serious injury, but somehow our daughter walked away without a scratch. I still don't understand how. It's like her bones were made of rubber that day. Story 25. I think I may carry some responsibility for my son's autism and epilepsy. Recent research shows that autoimmune disorders, like the ones I have, including lupus and autoimmune thyroiditis, can be a high-risk factor. At the time, I didn't know that. I had no idea that my own health issues could increase the risk for my child. And although his father also has epilepsy, I believed him when he said it was more likely to be inherited through the mother. Still, I carry the weight of guilt. Even though no one can say for sure what caused it, I feel like I should have known. I should have done more. Maybe it's not fair to myself, but it's how I feel. That said, my son is absolutely incredible. He's smart, kind, deeply compassionate, and full of love. Sure, he doesn't always understand right away when something hurts others, but once you show him, he takes it to heart and carries that lesson forward. He truly wants to be kind. He's going to be okay. I believe that. But some days I still wonder if things could have been easier for him, if only I had known more. And so I carry that guilt quietly, in different degrees, every single day. Story 26. This is a little late, but I need to say it. I'm not the parent in this story. I'm the son. And I know there's something my mom will never tell me. She'll never tell me who my biological father is. My mom moved from the Philippines to the US when she was young, along with her husband and his family. He joined the Navy, they started their life, and she had 2 kids, a son and a daughter. Then came me. But with me, the timing didn't quite add up. My mom got pregnant while her husband was overseas. In Filipino culture, divorce is heavily frowned upon. It's seen as a personal and family failure. So her husband stayed with her, even though he knew I wasn't biologically his. I was born and I was raised with my siblings. I grew up knowing my mom's husband as my dad, and I never questioned that. Until high school, during an argument between him and my mom, he shouted, "You're not my son." It stopped me in my tracks. I'd always felt a bit like the odd one out, especially since I don't look fully Filipino. That one moment confirmed what I had quietly wondered for years. He later apologized, and I told him honestly, "You are my dad. I am your son." We never spoke of it again. Years later, when I was around 18 or 19, I came home drunk and asked my mom directly who my real father was. She played dumb, pretended she didn't know. And I get it. She probably didn't want to reopen old wounds or hurt anyone. I never asked again. I don't ask my dad either. He took me in as his own and raised me, and I love him for that. But sometimes on quiet nights, I wonder, am I like my biological father? Do I have siblings out there I've never met? Would I recognize anything of myself in them? I try not to dwell on it. I had a dad growing up, and I still do. That matters more than biology. But some nights, you just wonder. Story 27. I'm not the mom in this story, but I know my parents know something about me that we've just never talked about. I was around 4 or 5 years old when Titanic came out, and my parents took me to see it in theaters. I had never seen a naked person before, outside of family, and I happened to catch a glimpse of the scene with Rose being sketched on the couch before my mom had the chance to cover my eyes. Well, I was really into drawing at the time. Was drawer even a word? And I decided to recreate what I saw. I drew my version of the scene, complete with everything from her pose to the couch, on some computer paper with a pen. And yes, I included all the details a 5-year-old might try to replicate. I was nervous about someone finding it, so I hid it under the hallway rug, which sat on top of a wooden floor. A few days later, I went to check on my masterpiece, and it was gone. No one ever said anything. My parents never brought it up, and I never asked what happened to it. I was a pretty odd kid, like truly quirky to the point that they once thought I might be on the spectrum. I'm not, apparently. So maybe they just didn't want to know why their child decided to sketch a dramatic film scene from memory. And honestly, I don't blame them. Story 28. Former stepfather here. My ex-wife is hiding things from her son that I will never tell him. Not because I agree with keeping secrets, but because the truth would devastate him, and that's not my place. But these same secrets were what eventually drove a wedge between me and his mom. She got pregnant very young. The man who fathered the child was in his late 20s, and at the time, he was dating one of her friends. My ex was around 15 when it happened. She always knew who the father was, but for a long time, she expressed regret over the entire situation, even while showing love for her son. Before we met, she had another pregnancy that ended. It happened while she was in a relationship, but she wasn't sure if the father was her partner at the time because she had been unfaithful. That loss affected her deeply. She would spiral into depressive episodes, expressing grief over that baby, and nothing I said could ever bring her peace. I'd remind her how much her son, an incredible kid who survived a very premature birth, loved her, but it didn't seem to reach her. That's when the resentment started. And the final straw came when I discovered she had cheated on me too. I'll never say anything to her son. He deserves love, stability, and peace. But I carry what I know quietly because some truths don't help the ones we care about. Story 29. I've never told my second son that he wasn't exactly planned. Our firstborn was only 4 months old when I found out I was pregnant again. After going through a 38-hour labor with my first, I really wanted to wait before having another baby. We always knew we wanted at least 2 children, but I hoped to space things out a bit more. I remember my mom telling me shortly after my first was born, "Take your time, focus on loving him, and if you get pregnant again too soon, consider ending it." What she didn't know was that I was already pregnant when she said that. I was horrified. I didn't tell her I was expecting again until I was nearly 7 months along, and no, I never considered not having him. Not for a second. The pregnancy was a complete surprise. I hadn't gotten my period back yet, which isn't uncommon when you're breastfeeding. We didn't find out until I started feeling movement well into the second trimester. Now, that surprise baby is our biggest joy. Literally, he's 17 years old now, stands 6 feet 5 inches, weighs 195 pounds, and was nearly 11 pounds at birth. His delivery only took 6 hours. The boys are 14 months apart, and I wouldn't change a thing. He may have come sooner than expected, but he came at exactly the right time. Story 30. My child was conceived after my partner, and I experienced an unplanned pregnancy that ended in miscarriage. It was an emotional time, and in the weeks that followed, we grew even closer. We knew the chances of getting pregnant again were higher, and we embraced that possibility, and that's how we had her. From the beginning, we had agreed that we only wanted one child. So after she was born, we took every precaution to make sure we wouldn't have another. It wasn't because we didn't love her. We just felt complete as a family. Then came her toddler years. When she was 2, she began talking and playing with an imaginary sister. It was surreal and honestly a little unsettling. I remember crying the first time I saw her reach out and interact with nothing. At age 3, she started asking why she didn't have a sister. She'd say things like, "I want one," or "Where is she?" Family and friends gave us a hard time about our decision to have only one child. Some even said we were being unfair. That same year, I found out I was pregnant again. It wasn't planned. My husband, still in his 20s, scheduled a vasectomy immediately. And at 5 weeks, I made the difficult choice to end the pregnancy. It's something I've never talked about, and it's something I'll never tell her. Story 31. I'm not a mother, and not even a woman, but I feel like this story still fits. It's about something my mom thinks she kept secret, but I've known the truth for over a decade. I started smoking when I was around 13. My friends and I would steal from my mom's tobacco stash. She rolls her own cigarettes. For the first year or 2, she didn't notice, but eventually she figured it out. She sat me down for the usual talk and then started hiding her tobacco to keep it from us. Her new hiding spot? A shoebox in her closet, right next to, well, a very personal item. One day while we were trying to sneak some tobacco, one of my friends discovered it. And like the immature kids we were, he picked it up and waved it around like a toy. Unfortunately, the seam tore, and whatever was inside spilled out. We panicked, tried to glue it back together, but we didn't get everything in, and the air had all leaked out. It lost its shape. Completely, I knew she'd notice. For days, then weeks, then months, I waited for the conversation, but it never happened. She never brought it up, not once. She just quietly let it go. And yet, every so often, out of nowhere, she'll ask, "Is there anything you want to talk to me about?" It's her way of leaving the door open, I think. But at this point, it's way too awkward to say anything. There's no way to explain it now without everyone cringing. Still, it reminds me of something important. No matter what, I know she'd support me, even through that. Story 32. I'm 21. I was almost a mom. I'd been with my boyfriend, now my ex, for 4 months. We got together in September 2012, And in February 2013, I found out I was pregnant. It was an incredibly difficult time. I couldn't keep food down. Every smell felt 100 times worse than normal, and I couldn't sleep, mostly from stress. I was raised with a Roman Catholic background. I wasn't baptized, but I was brought up to believe in God, kind of. My parents wanted me to choose what I believed when I was older. I never really made a clear choice, but I guess I do believe in something. I don't know, but if you're familiar with Catholic views on pregnancy and choice, you'll understand why I was terrified. My mom was with me when I found out. I just broke down crying. I was scared of how everyone would react. From the beginning, I knew I couldn't give up the baby for adoption. That had happened to my mom, and I couldn't bring myself to do the same. But then I looked at our neighbors, who had just gone through multiple rounds of IVF and finally had a baby, and I thought, why is this happening to me by accident while others go through so much to have a child? I told my boyfriend and his family. A few close friends knew too because I was missing school. Then one day I was on the couch, feeling awful, when my dad sat down next to me. I panicked, thinking he was going to pressure me to keep the baby. But he didn't. He told me he didn't think I was ready, that I shouldn't sacrifice everything for something I didn't want. And he was right. So I went to the doctor, got referred to a clinic, and I made the decision to end the pregnancy. 2 years later, I still think about that baby sometimes. Who would they have been? A boy or a girl? Would I have forced myself to stay with their dad? I don't know if I'll ever tell my future children. To this day, only my immediate family, close friends, my ex and his family know. Not even my grandparents, teachers, or online friends ever knew, and I'm not sure I'd even tell a future partner. Some things just stay with you. Story 33. Mom, here I have 4 kids, 3 girls and 1 boy. My youngest daughter will never know that I didn't want to have her. After realizing I was pregnant, I took emergency contraception, but it didn't work. I tried another dose later, not knowing that at that point it wouldn't make a difference. I wanted to end the pregnancy. I was severely depressed at the time, barely able to get out of bed, not taking care of myself. I was already struggling with 2 young daughters and no money. When I told my fiancé, he said he would leave if I went through with it. He ended up telling his parents, and they gave me a harsh talk. I felt deeply ashamed. I stayed silent and went forward with the pregnancy out of guilt, pressure, and fear of being alone. The entire pregnancy was emotionally heavy. He was abusive, especially when I tried to set boundaries. The night before I was induced, I said no to him, and in his anger, he shattered a glass and dragged me through it. I barely remember the first year of her life. My depression was untreated, and I was in survival mode. He eventually got help, and things changed. We had a son, this time a baby we both wanted. Financially, we're in a much better place now. Life looks different, but I still struggle to connect with her the same way. She's 5 now. I've gotten treatment for my mental health, and I'm a better version of myself today. Still, I often find myself wondering what life would have been like without her. And sometimes I quietly think, I would have preferred to stay poor than go through that again. Story 34. My firstborn. When you were about 6 months old, your mother was completely exhausted. It was one of those long nights where you just wouldn't settle. She was cradling you, pacing, trying everything to calm you. Eventually, too tired to stand anymore, she sat on the edge of the bed and propped her feet up, still holding you in her arms. But the exhaustion was too much. She dozed off for just a moment, and in that moment, you rolled out of her arms and landed face down on the hardwood floor. We heard the thump, then silence, then the most terrifying wail. We both jumped out of bed, completely panicked, shouting, "Oh my God," over and over. Your mom was sobbing. I was shaking. It felt like everything froze. But then we saw where your head had landed, right on top of one of her rubber Crocs. The thick silicone had cushioned the impact. You were okay. It was the worst 30 seconds of our lives. You were, and still are, our most precious thing in the world. And for a moment, I thought we had failed you. That feeling? It was worse than dropping a brand new phone on concrete. Way worse. Update. You're 7 now. You've been ahead in reading and math since you started school. You win art contests for your creativity and have an incredible eye for color. You do puzzles meant for kids older than you. You're outgoing, clever, and your sense of humor is amazing. Honestly, I sometimes joke that Bump may have made you smarter, but we've never told you, and probably never will. Story 35. My wife and I have been married for 8 years and have 2 kids, a 6-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old boy. Our son sleepwalks, so we've padded the hallways and gated the stairs to keep him safe. Recently, I was involved in a hit-and-run bike accident, which forced me to miss work. I'm self-employed, so the financial impact has been significant. My wife, who stays home with the kids, started job hunting to help us through this rough patch. Still, the stress of it all has been straining our relationship. At first, we kept our arguments private, away from the kids. But over time, the tension seeped into our everyday interactions. About 3 months ago, I found out she had been texting an ex. Things exploded. I said some things I regret, like, "You wanted kids. I told you I wanted to travel." It was one of those heated moments where anger took over. Mid-rant, we noticed our son Barrett standing at our bedroom door. He was humming. We both fell silent and chuckled nervously at the sight of him calmly sitting cross-legged at the doorway. Then, in a loud whisper, he said something that floored us. OP should have added a serious label to the thread. We still don't know where he picked that up from, and I can promise, I'll never tell him what kind of night he walked into. Story 36. I'm not a mom, but my mom recently shared some secrets with me that she never told before. When I was a baby, she took me with her to the bank in a cab. After finishing what she needed to do inside, she walked back to the car, and only then realized I was still in the back seat. She had left me there for about 10 minutes. Also, when I was a kid, I had a corkboard in my room. I used to write down my dreams on sticky notes and pin them to the back of the board. Future movie ideas, I guess. Some were pretty out there. One example, rescuing Sarah Michelle Gellar from a gang of rollerblading villains. One day I came home from school and the whole board was gone. My mom never said anything about it, and I was too embarrassed to ask. And then there was the time in high school when she found a photo of a woman in my pants pocket while doing laundry. I panicked and told her that a friend owed me money, and if he didn't pay up, I was going to show the photo to his mom and claim he gave it to me. Not exactly convincing, but she played along like she believed it. To this day, we've never discussed any of it again. Story 37. Before I knew I was pregnant, my daughter's father and I had already separated. He was abusive, physically, emotionally, and had started stealing from me and my family. He sold off all my mother's heirloom jewelry, anything made of gold, just to support his addiction. Even after we separated, he began stalking me, threatening my life, and saying things that forced me to get a restraining order. Not long ago, I found out that when he was a teenager, he had allegedly harmed a young member of his own family. She was 8 at the time. Years later, she went to the authorities. He denied it all and convinced everyone she was lying. Even worse, he later blamed her for something he did, using her to avoid prosecution. He has no contact with my daughter. We live in a different country now, and I plan to keep it that way. Story 38. Father of 2, 1 boy and 1 girl. When my relationship with my first child's mother ended, it was sudden and dramatic. She moved out of state and, not long after, got pregnant with someone new. Eventually, things between them fell apart, and she and I gave it another try. I was there when her second child, my daughter's half-sister, was born. I signed the birth certificate, but the relationship didn't last. She ended up getting back together with the biological father, and they're still married today. Before they married, they had to legally amend the birth certificate to reflect the true parentage. And I know none of us, her, him, or me, will ever tell her younger daughter that for 6 months I was her official father on paper. Story 39. Not a mom, but an uncle. When my nephew was about 11 months old, I was tasked with watching him while he played in the playpen. He was just crawling around like babies do, so I pulled out my phone to search something quickly. What I didn't realize was that during those few minutes, my nephew had managed to remove his diaper. It was not clean, and then, before I could react, he picked up what he found and put it in his mouth. The horror hit instantly. I dropped my phone and ran over. The face he made? I still laugh at it, even though I feel awful to this day. His parents still don't know, and neither does he. And I think I'll keep it that way. Story 40. I'm not a mom, but I've been helping raise my cousin's kids since she went to prison. They're currently being cared for by my grandmother, their great-grandmother. The kids have different fathers. The younger one's dad passed away a few years ago. The older child doesn't know who her father is, and no one has ever told her. But most of us in the family believe we know who he is. He's not someone we'd want in her life, a dangerous person with a history of threats and criminal activity. He was involved in drugs and at one point even threatened to harm members of our family. We're pretty sure he doesn't even know he has a daughter. She's 10 years old now, beautiful, intelligent, kind, and full of life. And we think it's best that she continues believing her father is no longer around, just like her younger sibling. I know that might sound harsh to some people, but sometimes keeping certain truths buried feels like the safest way to protect a child's heart. Story 41. I love you, Mom, but there are things I've never said to you, and probably never will. Sometimes I resent you for how you handled Dad's death. He took his own life after discovering your affair. That moment shattered everything for our family. You later entered a relationship with someone who ended up being abusive. And through all of that, there was no counseling for us, no family talks, no honest conversations, just silence and survival. My sister, the one most affected, spiraled into addiction, and we were all just left to figure it out ourselves. I had no idea what I was feeling. Anger, confusion, grief, all jumbled together, and I had no way to understand it, much less express it. I carry that resentment even now, but I don't tell you, because I know you were hurting too. You suddenly had 4 kids to raise alone, and you did your best. I see that now. I see how you try to show up for us in the ways you know how. And I can't stand the thought of you crying alone, revisiting everything that went wrong. So I carry this with me, like I always have. I love you, Mom, but sometimes I also carry pain that I don't know what to do with. Story 42. I work as a lawyer in the child welfare system, cases involving abuse, neglect, and foster care. My parents believe I chose this work because I'm naturally compassionate and driven by justice. That's not untrue, but the real reason goes much deeper. Growing up, my mom struggled with undiagnosed and untreated bipolar symptoms. We weren't removed from the home, but I later learned, while working for Child Protective Services, that our family had been investigated more than once. We were often truant. We got into trouble. Many of our friends ended up in foster care. And while things could have been worse, what we experienced still fell within the range of what many kids are removed for. My mom grew up with alcoholic parents, and she thought a lot of what we went through was normal. But it wasn't. We were unsupervised. We hid from her when she was manic. When she was in a depressive episode, we became the adults. My dad's approach was more extreme. He taught us to protect ourselves in ways no child should have to think about. If he had left, I truly believe we would have been removed from the home. The only reason we held it together was because my sisters and I were a team. We had bug-out bags, escape plans, contingencies. We learned how to survive, and that experience shaped everything I do now. It's what drives me. When I meet these kids in the system, I know them, because in many ways I was one of them, and that gives me a level of empathy and purpose that I bring into every case. Story 43. There's a lot my parents don't know, and probably never will. I own over $800 worth of long-distance, Bluetooth-connected adult devices, which I use to maintain relationships with people I've met online, mostly through games. I told my parents that I was staying at my best friend's house last month. Technically true in their version of the story. In reality, my best friend wasn't even involved. Instead, I met up with someone I'd been talking to online for a while. We split the cost of a hotel room. That night, I made the decision to share something deeply personal with them. It was my first time, and it was my choice. My best friend had nothing to do with any of it, but I used their name to keep everything hidden. Lately, I've been obsessed with the idea of visiting Dublin. Not because of the place, but because someone I have a major crush on lives there. We've shared some intense conversations about what we'd do if we were alone together, and I've spent far too much time figuring out how to sneak away for private time, how to hide marks, how to cover stories. My parents aren't necessarily anti-LGBTQ+, but they're not supportive either. I've never told them I'm pansexual or on the asexual spectrum. They used to push those topics when I was younger in uncomfortable ways, trying to catch me in something. I've heard their rants about how asexual people aren't real, how being trans is just confusion, and how same-gender attraction is disgusting. My best kiss? It was with a girl, and I've never told anyone at home.